press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update.
Hi everyone. In the last video we discussed how oxygen is transported by the blood. So the blood transport oxygen mainly in two ways as 3% of oxygen is transported in dissolved form and remaining 97% of the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so in this video I would like to discuss the transport of carbon dioxide. So as you know, the blood will transport both oxygen and as well as the carbon dioxide. So you know that the blood transport oxygen mainly in two ways, and once as 3% in the form of solution and remaining 97% as oxyhemoglobin. So when the oxygen reaches the body cells will utilize the oxygen for what? For the breakdown of organic nutrients like glucose. So what are the end products formed? The end products formed are carbon dioxide, water and energy. And the energy is used up by the body cells to carry out various activities. And the carbon dioxide which is produced as an end product, so that has to be eliminated outright. So the end product, that carbon dioxide which is produced it will diffuse into the blood, and the blood carries carbon dioxide to the lungs. So from where it is expelled out. Okay, so the blood carries carbon dioxide from body tissues to lungs mainly in three ways. So that's what we are discussing today, transport of carbon dioxide by the blood. So the blood transport carbon dioxide, mainly in three ways. One is in dissolved form, and secondly in the form of bicarbonates, in the form of bicarbonate ions, and lastly in the form of as carbaminohemoglobin. See, the blood transport carbon dioxide from the body tissues to lungs in three ways: in dissolved form, and in the form of bicarbonate ions, and as carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, so let us discuss one by one. Let us see how carbon dioxide is transported by the blood in three ways. So firstly, the carbon dioxide is transported in the dissolved form. How much percent of carbon dioxide is transported in the dissolved form? So you know that carbon dioxide, it is more soluble, so it is 20 to 25 times more soluble than that of oxygen. So it is having high solubility, right? So the carbon dioxide is more soluble than oxygen. More soluble than oxygen. Hence, about 7% of carbon dioxide get dissolved in the blood plasma. About 7% of the carbon dioxide gets dissolved in the blood plasma. So whereas oxygen, it is less soluble when compared to the carbon dioxide. So hence only 3% of oxygen is transported by the blood plasma in the form of solution. But whereas carbon dioxide is having high solubility than oxygen, about 7% of the carbon dioxide is transported in dissolved form, in the form of solution by the blood plasma. Okay, so the blood plasma will transport 7% of carbon dioxide in the dissolved state, and the remaining carbon dioxide. So the remaining carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonate and as carbaminohemoglobin. So the remaining carbon dioxide, so 7% get dissolved in the blood plasma, and remaining carbon dioxide will enter into the RBCs. So secondly, in the form of bicarbonate. Secondly, in the form of bicarbonate. See, body cells. Body cells. And this is a blood capillary. So this is what the lining of the blood capillary. So it is lined with endothelium, no? So this space it is called as interstitial space, and it is filled with, this space is filled with interstitial fluid. This is filled with the interstitial fluid, and this is what the lining of blood capillary. Here comes the RBC. So what are the components of blood? The blood having a fluid part that is called as the blood plasma, and the cellular part. So the cellular part includes RBCs, WBCs and the blood platelets, right? Okay, so this is what the RBC. And here is the blood plasma. So this is all the blood plasma, and this is the RBC. So so it is due to the oxidation of organic substrate, the carbon dioxide is continuously produced by the body cells, right? So this carbon dioxide produced by the body cells will diffuse us into the interstitial fluid, So from interstitial fluid to the blood. So it will first diffuse us into the blood plasma. So in the blood plasma, about 7% of carbon dioxide get dissolved in the blood plasma. It get dissolved in the blood plasma and transported in the form of solution. And remaining carbon dioxide, the remaining carbon dioxide will enter into the RBC. So the remaining carbon dioxide will enter into the RBC. So in the RBC, this carbon dioxide combines with water. So in the RBC, the carbon dioxide combines with water and forms what? Carbonic acid, H2CO3. So after entering into the RBC, about 70% of the carbon dioxide, it will combine with the water and form carbonic acid. So this reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme, that is carbonic anhydrase. So which is present in high concentration in the RBC. So the carbonic anhydrase, it's an enzyme which catalyzes the formation of carbonic acid. Okay, so in presence of this carbonic anhydrase, which is abundant in RBC, the carbon dioxide combines with water and form bicarbonic acid. It will form what? H2CO3, carbonic acid. So this carbonic acid form, it is unstable. So it is a highly unstable. So it quickly dissociates to form H plus and HCO3 minus ions. So the carbonic acid form, it quickly dissociates to form hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. So this hydrogen ions, so the hydrogen ions produced, if if these hydrogen ions are allowed to accumulate in the RBCs, so these hydrogen ions would make the blood acidic, right? So hence these hydrogen ions are buffered by the hemoglobin. So in order to prevent the decrease of pH, these hydrogen ions will combine with the hemoglobin, and forms hemoglobinic acid. It will form hemoglobinic acid. So the hydrogen ions formed combine with hemoglobin which is present in the RBCs and forms what? Hemoglobinic acid. And the bicarbonate ions formed. So the bicarbonate ions are negatively charged. Okay, so this membrane of RBCs, the membrane of RBC is permeable to negatively charged ions, whereas it is impermeable to positively charged ions. Hence, as bicarbonate ions are negatively charged, so these bicarbonate ions which are formed, which are produced in the RBCs will diffuse into the blood plasma. The bicarbonate ions, as they are negatively charged, the membrane of RBC is permeable to negatively charged ions. So the bicarbonate ions which are produced in the RBCs will diffuse into the blood plasma. So they will move from RBCs into the blood plasma. So once the bicarbonate ions move out of the RBCs, so this disturbs the ionic balance. So exit of bicarbonate ions causes changes in the ionic balance between the RBCs and as well as the blood plasma. So in order to maintain the ionic balance, the chloride ions which are present in the blood plasma will diffuse into the RBC, Okay, to maintain the ionic balance. So here the bicarbonate ions will diffuse from the RBCs into plasma, So this causes, this disturbs the ionic balance between the RBCs and as well as the blood plasma. To maintain the ionic balance, the chloride ions present in the blood plasma will enter into the RBCs, so that the ionic balance is maintained. So this movement of chloride ions from the blood plasma to RBC is called as what? Chloride shift. It is called as what? Chloride shift. Or it is also called as Hamburger's. It is also called as Hamburger's phenomenon. It's also called as what? The Hamburger's phenomenon. See, what is chloride shift or Hamburger's phenomenon? The movement of bicarbonate ions from the RBCs into the blood plasma and the movement of chloride ions from the blood plasma to RBC to maintain the ionic balance. So this is called as what? The chloride shift or the Hamburger's phenomenon. So you have to remember this. What is chloride shift or Hamburger's phenomenon? Okay. Now, so the bicarbonate ions which are now diffuses into the blood plasma, the blood plasma will carry the carbon dioxide in the form of bicarbonate ions. So about 70% of the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonates by the RBCs or by the plasma, by the blood plasma. Okay. So in the form of about 70% of the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonate ions by the blood plasma. When this deoxygenated blood from the body tissues reaches the alveoli of the lungs. So when this deoxygenated blood containing the carbon dioxide reaches the alveolar site, what happens? So there the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and partial pressure of oxygen changes, right? So what is the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli of lungs? It is 104 millimeters of mercury. What about the partial pressure of carbon dioxide? So it is 40 millimeters of mercury. So in the alveoli of lungs, the partial pressure of oxygen is more, high partial pressure of oxygen and low partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So it is due to the low partial pressure of carbon dioxide and high partial pressure of oxygen, the entire process get reversed at the alveolar site. So what has happened at the tissue level? No, this entire process get reversed at the alveolar site because of high partial pressure of oxygen and low partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Okay, see here, it is due to the high partial pressure of oxygen. So affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen increases, so that the hemoglobin binds with the oxygen and forms what? Oxyhemoglobin. So at the alveolar side, it is due to the high partial pressure of oxygen, the affinity of hemoglobin and oxygen increases, so that the hemoglobin will bind to the oxygen. So that will form what? Oxyhemoglobin. So thus oxyhemoglobin, so hemoglobin will bind to the oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin and releases again, it releases what? The H plus ions, hydrogen ions. So it binds with the oxygen and releases hydrogen ions. Okay. So once the oxyhemoglobin is formed at the alveolar site, so what happens? This oxyhemoglobin, it behaves as a strong acid and it releases excess of hydrogen ions. So it releases excess of hydrogen ions. Okay. So at the tissue level, hydrogen ions binds with hemoglobin and forms hemoglobinic acid. So this reaction is reversed at the alveolar site. So the hemoglobin, it releases the hydrogen ions by combining with the oxygen. Okay. So once the oxyhemoglobin formed, it releases the excess of hydrogen ions because the oxyhemoglobin, it acts as a strong acid. Okay. Now the hydrogen ions are there in the RBCs, and again what happens here? Here also it is reversed. The bicarbonate ions, now the bicarbonate ions which diffuses into the blood plasma, no, again the bicarbonate ions will re-enter into the RBCs. So the bicarbonate ions diffuses from the RBCs into a blood plasma at the tissue level, but at the alveolar level, when the deoxygenated blood comes to the alveoli of the lungs, so the bicarbonate ions which present in the blood plasma will re-enter into the RBCs. So once the bicarbonate ions re-enter into the RBCs, what about these chloride ions? The chloride ions present in the RBCs will diffuses out into the plasma, So at the alveolar site, the bicarbonate ions enter into the RBC and chloride ions diffuses into the blood plasma. So this is called as what? Reverse of chloride shift. So the reverse of chloride shift occurs at the alveolar site. Okay. So now the carbon dioxide combines with the hydrogen ions. So now hydrogen ions are available now here. So this again the bicarbonate ions combines with the hydrogen ions. Okay, and forms what? Carbonic acid. So as you know that the carbonic acid is unstable, so it quickly dissociates to form carbon dioxide and water. Now the carbon dioxide produced, now this is at the alveolar level, no. So this is what? Alveolus. This is the again blood capillary. So this is what? The alveolus. So now the carbonic acid formed, it is highly unstable and it quickly dissociates, okay, now to form what? Carbon dioxide and the water. Now this carbon dioxide will diffuses from the RBCs into the blood plasma. Okay, so this is at the alveolar, this is at the alveolar level. Okay, then from the blood plasma, the carbon dioxide will diffuses into the alveolus. Okay, so from where it is expelled, out. Okay, so this is how the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonate ions by the blood plasma. Okay, understood clearly? So in the body tissues, the carbon dioxide diffuses into the blood and it enters into the RBCs. In the RBCs, it combines with water and forms carbonic acid. As the carbonic acid is unstable, it readily dissociates to form hydrogen and bicarbonate ions. The hydrogen ions combine with hemoglobin and forms hemoglobinic acid, whereas the bicarbonate ions, they are negatively charged, they diffuses out of the RBCs into the blood plasma. Okay, so in response to this, the chloride ions, to maintain the ionic balance, the chloride ions from the blood plasma will diffuses into the RBCs. Okay, so this is what the chloride shift or Hamburger's phenomenon. Okay, so now this bicarbonate ions present in the blood plasma, no, the blood plasma will carry the bicarbonate ions to the alveolar site. So about 70% of the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonate. And at the alveolar site, what happens? All these process get reversed because of high partial pressure of oxygen, which favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. As oxyhemoglobin form, it releases excess of hydrogen ions. So once the hemoglobin binds with the oxygen, the hemoglobin releases the hydrogen ions, and oxyhemoglobin form, it acts as a strong acid and releases excess of ions, and the bicarbonate ions which are present in the blood plasma will re-enter into the RBCs, and it combines with hydrogen ions and forms carbonic acid. As the carbonic acid is unstable, it quickly dissociates to form carbon dioxide and the water, and the carbon dioxide which is formed, it will diffuses into the blood plasma, and from the blood plasma to the alveoli, from where it is expelled out. Okay, so this is what the transport of carbon dioxide in the form of bicarbonate. And so this is how much? 70%. Then remaining carbon dioxide. So the remaining carbon dioxide is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. It is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. How much of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin? Nearly 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. See here, see, this formation of carbaminohemoglobin occurs at the tissue level. So at the tissue level, at the tissues, formation of carbaminohemoglobin occurs. Okay, it is because of two factors. So at the tissues, what is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide? It is 45 millimeters of mercury. And what about the partial pressure of oxygen? It is 40 millimeters of mercury. So in the tissues, the partial pressure of oxygen is low or high? Low partial pressure of oxygen and high partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So these two factors favors the formation of carbaminohemoglobin. So these two factors responsible for the binding of carbon dioxide with the hemoglobin to form carbaminohemoglobin. Okay. So at the tissues, so the carbon dioxide is produced in the tissues, no, that will diffuse us into the blood plasma. Only 7% get dissolved in the blood plasma, remaining all that carbon dioxide will enter into the RBCs. In the RBCs, so 70% is transported in the form of bicarbonates, and remaining 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide, no, it will combines with the hemoglobin. It will combines with the hemoglobin and form a temporary complex that is called as carbaminohemoglobin, and forms carbaminohemoglobin. So this formation of carbaminohemoglobin occurs at tissues. It is because of two factors: low partial pressure of oxygen and high partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So when this deoxygenated blood reaches the alveoli of the lungs, that is at the lung level, so the partial pressure of oxygen is low or high. So in the alveoli of the lungs, the partial pressure of oxygen is high. High partial pressure of oxygen and low partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So these two factors at the alveoli of the lung favors the dissociation of carbaminohemoglobin, okay, so to form carbon dioxide and water. So at the alveoli of the lungs, the carbaminohemoglobin, it dissociates. So here it forms carbaminohemoglobin. At the alveolar level, the carbaminohemoglobin dissociates to form carbon dioxide and water. Okay. Now the carbon dioxide will diffuse us from the RBCs into the blood plasma, and from the blood plasma it will diffuse us into the alveoli, and from where it is expelled out. Okay. So this is what about 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Understood clearly? So the blood will transport carbon dioxide mainly in three ways. So 7% in the dissolved form, 7% in the dissolved form, 70% in the form of bicarbonates, and 20 to 25% in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Carbaminohemoglobin. Okay. So understood clearly? So this is how the carbon dioxide is transported by the blood. Understood? Okay. Then in our next video, we will discuss the regulation of respiration and also the disorders of respiratory system. So okay, so this respiration process, it occurs in 5 different steps now, which is the first step, breathing. Second is the exchange of gases between the alveoli and the blood, and the third is transport of gases by the blood, and the fourth one is exchange of gases between the blood and the body tissues, and the last one is utilization of oxygen by the body cells. So the body cells will utilizes the oxygen for the breakdown of organic nutrients. So that step, it is not explained in this chapter. So you will learn that step in another chapter that will come under plant physiology. Okay. So this is about, these are the different steps involved in the process of respiration. So in our next video, I am going to discuss the disorders of respiratory system. Understood? Okay. Thank you.